Guys, this is Mel. First off, Happy New Year. I'm literally recording January 1st, 2020 at 12:20 a.m. Got through all my Happy New Year texts, phone calls, posts, anything like that. And I really just wanted to record this video as the first one. And this video, if you haven't seen from the thumbnail or from the title, is going to be talking about the Netflix series Daybreak. So first off, this is video 640. Let's start off the year with that. Also, Daybreak, it was on my Netflix list, but I do want to give a shout out to Jasper Benson K, who made a comment about reviewing Daybreak on my last video of 2019 video. It wasn't, okay, maybe I did forget, but it was on the list. So there was plans, but you just reminded me, and then I wanted to talk about it with my coworker before she was leaving, so that's kind of what prompted me to binge watch it in 2 days. Normally it would take me one, but it really depends on when you start the first day. Depends if you're going to need 2 days. So if you haven't seen, sorry about that, but if you haven't seen my videos or at all, for this video, it's going to be a little different. I'm going to basically try to recap season 1, give you my thoughts about it. So huge spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the series at all, please go do so first and then come back and see what I have to say about season 1, because I really can't talk about it without giving spoilers, because a lot of things I do want to make reference to and point out some connections and stuff like that. I won't spoil the whole thing for you, but there are moments where I'm going to be like really like going in with a fine-tooth comb to point things out. So just be aware of that. Also, this video is just made for fun. It's a commentary. Not making any money off of this. This is just a way for me to share my thoughts about this series with you guys who may or may not be fellow fans of the show, or maybe if you want to see what I have to say and check it out for yourself. I really think you should check it out. It's definitely different, and we'll go into it a little bit more about as to why. But I think that's, otherwise all video reminders are up on screen. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. I'm going to try to do this in 30 minutes. So let's start the clock and let's see what's in store for this video. So my plan for the video up on screen, I'll also put timestamps with them as I'm editing, because there's no way I'm going to know what the timestamp is as I'm recording. So we're going to talk about the series formatting. Next, we'll talk about specific characters in themselves. Then we'll talk about the apocalypse mythology that they've based around for Daybreak. Then we'll go into any questions that I had left unanswered in season 1. Then we'll go into the connections I found with Supernatural, because it's pretty much 2 major things. Immediately before episode 1 even finished, you already see a connection to the TV shows. And since I'm a huge fan, you gotta know I gotta dedicate a section of the video to that. So we'll talk about that as number 5. Number 6, we're gonna talk about what parts I found a little unnerving or a little disgusting in the episode. I'm not going to talk about my favorites. I might have mentioned them along the way as I talk about certain things. It's just that for 10 episodes, it's a lot to cover. So we'll go into that. And then I'll go into season 2 predictions, or what I have hopes for in the future. And yeah, so timestamp. And then maybe some New Year's resolutions or some thoughts at the very end. Who knows? Hopefully I remember at the very end. Let me write that down. NY. Okay, so let's start. Now I'm going to actually just cancel the clock. I'm going to restart it, because that seems only fair. So 30 minutes starting now. So series format. As I said, Netflix premiered the 10-episode series 1 on October 24th, 2019. I got through 8 of the episodes in one night. No, 7 of them one night, and then 3 of them the next night. So there's that. So it's very easy to do. It's very doable, especially if you have a good chunk of time on your hands. So the series itself, though, the way I'm seeing it, is pretty much an apocalypse that pretty much killed off all the adults, and the kids are left to their own devices. And it's definitely different, because when you thinking apocalypse, I'm thinking more of like a serious undertone, trying to figure out how are they going to survive, what brings it the apocalypse type thing. So you're more of like a very serious, dramatic tone to it. But this one's more of a comedy. It really plays on the perspective of that it's a kid's world where they have to deal with all this shit that comes with the apocalypse, and just how they're trying to survive in a world where there's actually no rules whatsoever. So it's very different from The Walking Dead. It's very different from like Bird Box, which has a different apocalyptic feel to it. It's very different to like World War Z. It's very different to like all these other Zombieland, any of the stereotypical zombie movies. Well, Zombieland maybe a little bit because there's some comedic element to it, but like it's very different. So just be aware of that. Which initially, I will say this, normally I would have been not for, like, when it comes to apocalypse, I want to go more for the real aspect of it because, God forbid, I hope we never have to deal with one in real life. And I would want to know what the serious obstacles that you'd have to go through, like, and how you would realistically deal with them in that given setting. So that's usually what I go for because that's usually more of the realistic realm for me. So for anything comedic in this sense, and that seems like more of a parody for me in this type of situation, I wouldn't really go for it. But the way that they do it in Daybreak was actually very entertaining. It was very, it was a different spin to it. It didn't seem like it was another zombie movie that I was watching. It definitely took on a different spin to it. It definitely made you feel, and I'll get into it in a little moment, but it made you feel like you were actually part of it, which I'll talk about in a moment. But setting is Glendale, California. The timeline, you get a mix of, it wasn't just set in post-apocalyptic time. It switches between flashbacks of like right before, because the I guess like point zero or like ground zero, whatever, or the moment where the apocalypse started, it happened during the homecoming game that Glendale High was participating in. So I don't know how far into the flashbacks they go up to leading to the homecoming game, but there's a lot of events that happened prior to it that we take note of. I don't know what like the time between each of those events happens. And then the present day post-apocalyptic time is happening 6 months after the apocalypse has started. So that's a little timeline information there for you. Now, in regards to what I was saying about the show making you feel like you're actually there, is because they are breaking the fourth wall repeatedly. And this is when the character is actually talking to the camera as opposed to avoiding the fact that the camera is there and treating it as if like there's no one recording. This one, it literally, the characters talk to the camera and make it seem like we are actually a character in the series with them. Like we are there to, like they're taking us under their wing and they're like trying to clue us in the fact that, okay, this is what you missed type of thing. And even at one point, I think it was episode 109, they actually had it where like the main character was talking to the camera, to the audience, and then on screen they had like a written response to what we as the audience would say, as if to keep the conversation going and it wasn't just one-sided for the main character. So that was something right there. So it's very, very different. I did think when it first started, it gave me a lot of Saved by the Bell vibes, just like with the main character in the series, which is Josh Wheeler, reminding me more of like Zach Morris from Saved by the Bell, and the fact that he was very like, he was a very troublemaker in school, C student. He was more of like the social interactions of people rather than the academic, and he seemed like he had his own rules about things. So either like that, but now they say rules, it kind of also reminds me of Ned's Declassified School Survivor Guide with Ned Bigby, who would talk to the camera and give advice to kids in the Nickelodeon series. So there's also something like that. A lot of people will say that it is lots of homages to Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which I could see because Ferris Bueller himself is in the show, but I confess that I've never seen the movie, so I can't really talk much about that. But the fourth wall is a constant thing that it does, and it definitely brings a new take to the series, which I actually found that I liked. And also because of the fourth wall breaking, you find that with each episode, there was a character change. So up on screen, I'll list who was kind of taking point when it regards to addressing the camera. And usually when a different character was in the lead, I guess you can say, for that episode, in regards to the narration or the breaking the fourth wall, that's usually when we would get that character's backstory. We'd get more of a focus for that character. So with episodes 1, 2, 9, and 10, we get Josh being the narrator, and then we get Angelica for episode 3, Principal Burr for episode 4, I will say this though, right off the bat, spoiler alert, Principal Burr is the narrator for episode 4, and yet at this point you don't know that he's alive in the present day, or not alive, but like this is also the episode where they reveal who is underneath the Baron Triumph mask. And with Principal Burr being the narrator, he's making the audience, he's misdirecting the audience to believe that it's Hoyles who is Baron Triumph. But the reason that this doesn't work for me, I knew immediately that it wasn't going to be Hoyles, just because, one, based off the 3 previous episodes where they had narration changes, why would Principal Burrs be the narrator if he wasn't a huge focus in the episode? And 2, I think it was in episode 2 or 3, they showed the real Baron Triumph eating the severed finger of Josh's, telling me that the Baron Triumph is a ghoulie and Hoyles is a student. So unless, at this point we don't know why at this point, because of that, I'm thinking more chance that it's a ghoulie, probably the principal, who is Baron Triumph, even because also matching with the fact that the narration is happening from him for his reveal. And it makes no sense to me, while even though Jaden Hoyles was a dick before the apocalypse, it makes no sense why he would be the one turning to eat other kids unless he was a ghoulie. And since he was still technically a kid as a student, it makes no sense. So that was a huge payoff, I guess you could say, in the fact that all these misdirects, I wasn't falling for them because it just didn't make sense. I get what they're trying to do, but if you paid more closer attention to the patterning of the show, then you'd realize certain aspects of it. Also, that's another thing the show does too with the breaking of the fourth wall. It also goes back to kind of remind you specifically, like, oh, this person has showed up before, this is where you might have missed it, or they might tell you, like, oh, pay attention to this, it's going to come into play later on. Like, it's really driving the audience to follow specific narrative points instead of more of relying on the fact that, like, oh, we're going to put this here in the corner and hopefully the audience will pick up on it. Sometimes it's better to have that happen instead of making it seem like it's force feeding you the information, like Daybreak might seem to be doing, but because we're getting it from an actual character explaining it to us and showing us these how these connections to it helps it in a sense. Like a lot of things, it helps bring out the parallels a lot more. It helps us bringing out full circle moments. Or if something that's been repeated and you're wondering still why is it being repeated, and then you have the characters explaining it as if they're talking to us, it does help. I found like it livens things up a little bit more. It makes it seem more like it, like I said before, how it seems like we are actually part of the show itself. So that's something there. So that was episode 4, was Principal Burrs. 5, we get Wesley. 6, we get Turbo, which was very interesting because Turbo post-apocalypse, he can't speak, or if he does, he was one of the only few that was like severely injured from the blast and survived from it. Everybody else seemed to still be intact. But so with Turbo, his whole narration is done through subtitles or cue cards or like the written word. There's like, and then like his like grunts and grumbles and stuff like that. The only time we actually hear him talking is when it's in the flashbacks. And maybe the 2 times he does it in post-apocalypse. But every time he does that, he starts bleeding from the mouth, making me assume that maybe it was his voice box that was damaged, and that's why he's resulted to the grumbling and like the cue cards and stuff. But we do get a little bit more about Turbo in that one. Also, we do get his father being played by, I believe, Joe Manganiello as well. So that was a surprising one there. Episode 7, you get Miss Crumble's point of view in kind of like a meta sitcom type of format. And also we find out how she is still a coherent ghoulie, which I will talk about later in characters. But that's a little story from there. 108 is what it's done from Samara's point of view. And this is entirely done in flashbacks. There's no jumping between past and present in this episode, like in all the previous episodes. This one is strictly just in the flashback, and it's really focusing on Samara's relationship with Josh and what they did on this ditch day that I think was possibly the day of homecoming or the day before the homecoming game, which was the day the whole apocalypse started, which was 6 months previously. So there's that. 109, we do get a mix of Josh and Eli's point of view. We do get Eli's backstory in this episode, though. And then again, episode 10 is kind of in Josh's point of view, but then since it's the whole cast coming together, it doesn't really focus on a point of view specifically because it's so packed in the action and trying to stop this final nuke from going off. So that is something there. And then also, because we have kids trying to be in control in Glendale, they have their own tribes. And they pretty much explain it as the tribes pretty much being the extreme versions of the cliques you'd find in high school. And they actually have a lot. And so I found a list. We don't actually see all of them in the show, but we do see like symbols or some like name drops for them. So we have the 4-H Club, we got the AV Club, we got the Cheermazons, which are the cheerleaders turned Amazons, which we do see. And their leaders being Demi Anderson, Miriam, and then Victoria and her interpreter, Veronica. We got the Daybreakers being named by KJ, aka Karen Jane, who is the foreign exchange student who pretends that she doesn't know English just so people are more likely to talk around her because they assume that she can't understand, but she does. So there's that. We got the Delta Chaotai, which I don't think we meet. We got the Disciples of Cardassia, which we do meet briefly. So there's that. We get the Gamers with their leader, Aria Killigan, who owed a favor to KJ. There's also the Highland Park Donut Hoes, which are name dropped. We get the Jocks, which included the golf team, with characters like Mona Lisa, who happened to be Turbo's second in command, Turbo being the leader of the Jocks. And then we got the golf team of Terry, Larry, Jerry, Gary, and Barry. They're pretty much cursed from the very beginning. So there's that. Apparently there's also the group called the LARP Lords, the Porto Bakery Boys, which were name dropped. We got the STEM Punks, which we've seen, and then we got the Young Cops, which were name dropped as well, though I didn't expect it to be spelled like this. So that's something there. So let's move on to characters very quickly. Again, I don't talk about all the characters, just ones that do appear in majority of the episodes, I would say. But first off, we're going to get Josh Wheeler, played by Colin Ford. And Josh is supposed to be a transfer student from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. He has nicknamed his katana sword Sam, after Samara, who he happens to be dating before the apocalypse hits. He is revealed to be a very picky eater who loves the Cheesecake Factory in episode 108 during the flashback. We find out that he rarely sees his mom due to her work schedule. He calls her his post-it parent. And they moved to Glendale because of her job. His dad is still back in Toronto, although his situation is revealed in 108. Yes, and more of 109. And then also we find out that Josh knows American Sign Language. That is revealed in episode 110. So that's something there. We got Samara, aka Sam Dean, played by Sophie Simnett. She even says herself to explain the name. 2 syllables, 2 boys' names, Sam Dean. So there's that. We find that everybody loves Sam, though she claims that no one truly knows her, yet she knows everybody. She even calls herself the human sorting hat. She's always the welcome committee for new students, and she tries to place them in their appropriate cliques to help the principal out. So there's that. We also find out more about her in her episode, in episode 108, where she truly exposes the meaning of double standard and the views placed and the challenges she has placed for being a woman. So that's something there. And then we got Angelica Green, played by, I hope I say it right, but Olivia Allen Lynn. Also, this whole time that I've been seeing her, I kept wondering whether or not I've seen her before. At first, when I look at IMDb for her, I noticed that Young and the Restless, I don't watch Young and the Restless, but my mom does. So every time I'm home during the weekday and it's on, I see her watching the show. And she happens to be one of the children of the characters. So I think it was like Faith Newman or something. So I thought, okay, maybe like that. But it was the last name, Alan Lynn, that was so familiar for me. So I checked. And she turns out to be the younger sister of Natalie Alan Lynn, who was Lauren Strucker on the TV show Gifted. And she actually appears as a character in Daybreak as Mavis. So the whole time I was looking at Angelica Green, I thought maybe I've seen her before, and it could just very well be the resemblance that she has to her older sister because she was Lauren Strucker for me. So a little something right there. Thought I'd mention it. I will bring up Mavis in a moment. But anyways, Angelica is, first off, reminds me of the girl from Rugrats, but she is a 10-year-old genius with very flexible morality. She ends up being a drug dealer with inedible slime, revealed in episode 103. And she knows how to drive, so she's very resourceful as well. But she could also be kind of a sociopath as well. And she prides herself in being able to manipulate people. So paint that picture as you will. But then we also have Wesley Fisk, aka played by Austin Krute. And he is the former bully of the school that turns to becoming a samurai post-apocalypse, trying to be a pacifist and trying to go the route of redemption for himself. He is a former football player, newly transferred from what I can understand as well in his episode 105 that's revealed. And he has a very bumpy relationship with Turbo. He actually, from the understanding, they were really good together before the apocalypse, but then afterwards, when Turbo got a little aggressive in his role as leader, which left Wesley doing some things he wasn't proud of, so that ultimately got him to leave the Jocks, which kind of put this rift between their relationship. So we do see that struggle there. Well, speaking of Turbo Pulowski, aka Turbo Bro Jock, played by Cody Kersley, leader of the Jock tribe. He is the one that is severely burned during the apocalypse, and as I mentioned before, he might not be able to speak without bleeding from it. They don't really go much into it from that. Initially, when he first speaks, and when the gamers try to attack I think it's episode 8. No, not 8. 7, maybe? 9? I don't know. It's one of the episodes where the gamers try to infiltrate the Jock tribe, and Turbo looks into the camera, kind of like goading Josh, saying like, you lose type of thing. And it's when he's actually speaking and you see blood coming out of his mouth. I thought maybe that it was whatever is turning ghoulies into ghoulies was affecting him, and that was like the first sign of him turning. Because at this point, we don't know what was the cause of them becoming ghoulies. So I thought maybe like he was closer to being like the age of being an adult. So I thought maybe that might be the case. But then when we see him again talking with Wesley in a later episode, he starts bleeding again when he starts whispering, "I love you" to him. So it really they don't really fully go into why he can't speak. It's always just assumed that he got severely damaged. So it could just be the voice box, and the blood could be the reason. So that's something there. But we do find out that he is the former quarterback. He was the star quarterback. He is also from a family where his dad is constantly traveling to save the children of the world. Mostly, it also came down to it in his episode 106, when you see the dynamic between him and his dad, is there a lot of guilt tripping going on. Where Turbo kind of says like this homecoming game is important. There's gonna be scouts there for me, like kind of like inferring that he wanted his dad to be there. And then his dad was pretty much saying a child dies every hour that I'm not out there. Your game's for 3 hours. I'm delayed 16 hours for a flight. That's gonna be, or 10 kids every hour are dying in the world. And he's saying like, if I go to your game and then I'm missing 16 hours of flight, that's like over 100 kids. I think it was over 160 kids that are left dying. Do you really want that? Or do you want me to save the children? Like, he puts a huge guilt trip as to why, if Turbo picked the selfish route and wanted his dad to be at the game, it makes him seem like a dick that he doesn't care about the children of the world type of thing. So it's a very rocky dynamic between father and son there. But it definitely, when you think back on it, when you you try to see the beginnings of Turbo the leader and his reaction to father-son dynamics, especially when dealing with the STEM punk tribe, then it's definitely very revealing in 106 because of his father. So keep that in mind. Then we have Eli Kardashian with a C, and this played by Gregory Kazian. He's the one that has the imaginary girlfriend named Mavis, as I mentioned, played by Natalie Allen Lind, aka Lauren Strucker from The Gifted. But Eli is the one that managed to pretty much commandeer Glendale Mall, barricade it, and pretty much call it his own. And he was doing fine in that territory until Josh, Angelica, and Wesley came in and kind of settled shop up there. And then Eli just tried to get them out but couldn't. But plus he's always the one that's trying to the knockoffs, they always call it. He was always the one that had knockoffs of everything. He's also the one who roamed around as the fake Baron Triumph. So that is something there. He's a very interesting character for sure. He definitely knows his way around things. I think he also used to work at one of his relatives' hair salons, so he knows a little bit more of like certain things as well, of people, of certain products and stuff like that. So Eli was quite a character as well. How his fate in the show was not fair at all. I actually think he had one of the most developed growths for a character throughout the series. Josh had one too, for sure. They pretty much all had one, but I think with Eli, you really see it, and it definitely comes in the form of like my peeve of them reaching redemption, and then it's the end of the line for them type of thing. Huge spoiler right there for you, but like there's that. Then we have Miss Crumble. She's played by Krista Rodriguez. She's the former biology teacher who was bullied into having to change her name into Miss Crumble because all of her paychecks and the school system only had her as Miss Crumble because she broke down in front of students. She is the only coherent ghoulie known as the Witch that the kids come across, and we find out later that it was due to a traumatic brain injury that she got just before the apocalypse started. During an altercation with Principal Burr. So this is kind of, they're explaining it that this is why she still has a lot of her facilities still intact. She's still able to have higher brain function, just a little more crazier vibes and different urges now. So that's something there. And then we have Principal Burr, aka Baron Triumph, played by Matthew Broderick. And he is the other functioning ghoulie of the show, and he captures and eats the kids while bearing on the Baron Triumph gear. Former principal at Glendale High that took bribes from parents to change student grades and such before the apocalypse hit. He also had a somewhat relationship with Mrs. Crumble, and he has a severe nut allergy as well. I actually didn't pick up on that until it was revealed at the very end, but then they, like I mentioned before, they do bring a lot of things back to kind of make you see when it was, like, it wasn't just like a random, oh, let's put it here thing, but it's something that they've planted throughout the whole series type of thing. So that was pretty cool as well. Plus, yeah, for some reason he survived, and I'll bring that up later because that's a huge question I have. But let's talk about the mythology of the show for sure, specifically this apocalypse. So it's revealed to be a biological warfare. The adults are turned into ghoulies, and it's not just they're mindless zombies. The ghoulies are always repeating the last thought they had before the blast went off. So if they were meant to go shopping for a pair of pants at Lululemon, that's all they're going to be repeating. There's a sale at Lululemon. There's a sale at Lululemon, right? Or if they were thinking about their taxes before the blast hit them, they're going to keep repeating their words about taxes the whole time. So there's that. Now, though, they crave blood. So that's a huge difference there. They're definitely attracted to blood. They're attracted to loud noises. So typical of any zombies. But their ghoulie bite is not infectious. Josh previously thought so, which is rightfully so. But then Angelica showed that her arm was covered in ghoulie bites, and nothing had happened to her. So that's a huge experiment right there. Makes me wonder now, knowing about Angelica, if she purposely got herself bit just to see if it was an error or not. Like, because she always talks about having a hypothesis, performing an experiment, and drawing a conclusion. Now that I think about it, I'm wondering if all those bites on her arm were part of her experiment or not. That'd be a little crazier right there, instead of her just being like, because she's smart enough, I believe, not to put herself in harm's way, and yet to get all those bite marks. I feel like she'd have to have purposely done that to herself to maybe get answers. I don't know. I'm just thinking of that right now. So there's that. Also, the animals mutated, and they all mutated differently. You either got a pug that's like super large, or you got like a squirrel that has these weird like antenna things, or you got crows with 2 heads. So it's like weird. But then also you have the adults themselves, or the ghoulies, also mutating in a way. So in episode 102, we saw Miss Crumble, or the witch, showing that she could retract her jaw, and it was gross. So there's that. We also had her, I don't know which episode, but it also had her having holes in her back, and they were like moving as if like, usually in like in the alien movies, it's like that type of thing. We also see in episode 110 that Principal Burr had another arm growing from within his stomach. I don't get why, but that's another mutation right there. So there's a bunch of these mutations happening with the ghoulies, specifically with these two. Also, when they touched hands with each other, their skin was like, it's kind of like when you're touching slime or jello, or not jello, slime or plate, no, pretty much slime or glue or something, and you put it between your hands and you try to separate your hands. You got that stringy action going on between the two of them. When Crumble and Bird touched their hands together, you had that same thing going on for some reason. So that's a weird theory there. And then also in episode 109, it revealed that the HPV vaccine was what saved the kids from becoming ghoulies, because all the kids who didn't get the vaccine were the ones that kind of exploded when the apocalypse hit. That doesn't really explain why they got exploded, but the adults got turned into ghoulies. But we'll get right into that right now in questions, because I do have a lot of questions. First one is just a common sense one for 109. Is why would Josh pretend to be Baron Triumph to infiltrate the school if he knows that Principal Burrs, aka the real Baron Triumph, is inside the school? The whole point of taking a disguise is to trick people inside that you are that person. If everybody in that school knows who the real Baron Triumph is, and he's in that school, why would you try to pretend to be him? It'd be very different if you knew that you had captured Baron Triumph and you were keeping him locked up and you were trying to impersonate him to get into the school. That is smarter. But if you already know that he is in there and everyone in there knows who he is, why are you pretending to be him? That makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, he lucked out with the school being evacuated, but like still, that makes no sense. Another question is, why is Principal Burr a functioning adult? I mean, Mrs. Crumble's coherency as a ghoulie was explained to be because of her traumatic brain injury. So it makes sense that she had this brain injury moments before the apocalypse hit. So then that was kind of like her saving grace to still keep her olfactory. It's kind of like it reversed the effect. So the fact that her brain was damaged and then the apocalypse kind of reversed it to now keep what it once was. And all the ghoulies who had functioning brain function before it hit and then after it hit, they're now mindless zombies with the only last thought in their head. Like, that makes sense. But they did not explain how Principal Burr was still alive. I mean, they explained how that he claims to have gone into the bomb shelter that was built inside the school and hide out there for a few months. But that still doesn't explain why he was turned... I understand why he was turned into ghoulie, but it doesn't explain why he was still a functioning ghoulie and not like all the other ones. The only way I could see it being a difference, and there's a timer, is the fact that he eats a lot of kids. So it's like, it's kind of with iZombie. So with the TV show iZombie, they have the notion of the fact that the zombies eat brains. If they have a consistent diet of brains, they can still be functioning beings that could hide being a zombie. But the moment that they're deprived of having a source of brain consumption, they revert into the stereotypical zombie who is mindless and trying to grab for brains. That makes sense. This situation, that's kind of that's the only way I can understand it, being that maybe Principal Burr isn't like all the other ghoulies is because he is keeping a constant diet of human flesh. Because as you see, he captures kids and eats them. Even when he came back to the school to be principal, he was preserving golf club member Barry and chopping up his arm, his leg, all these different parts of it, and then making them into smoothies and kind of rationing his human intake. So then that is possibly still allowing him to still have his regular functions while being a ghoulie. So it still makes him different than Miss Crumble, but at the same time, it would explain why he's different from all the other ghoulies is because he's constantly feeding himself, while the other ghoulies are either struggling to find a food source or they're just stuck in their mindless loop. So I'm just wondering, why was he exempted? Because that's just all based off my theory. There's no actual like answer from the show as to why he was exempt from being like all the other ghoulies. And it's not like it wasn't like he had a brain injury like Miss Crumble when the apocalypse hit, since he was the one that caused her brain injury, right? So just like a question of like, what the hell happened? Why see the exemption? Like, like all that questions. So there's that. Also, with that said, though, this has me, because of my confusion about Principal Burr still being coherent, this has me second guessing the whole HPV vaccine being the reason why the children were saved. Because then he kind of, Principal Burr and also I don't trust Principal Burr, so the fact that he's giving out this information has me second guessing whether or not it's valid or not. Because he was explaining that the vaccine only worked on kids and teenagers because adults, their bodies couldn't accept the vaccine. But with that reasoning, those adults were kids once who had the vaccine before, right? So it's like it would still be in their system. So I don't get if the vaccine was, if it was a different vaccine that maybe it was just brand new, trial and error, and the kids were the first ones to get a dose of it, then I'd understand it. But the HPV virus, that's something that like you get as a kid. That means all the adults should be inoculated for it already. And if not, then it'll only be a few of them that be not. Then like why would they be ghoulies and stuff? Like, you know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense why it's only select few this way. I can understand it if like, plus also the HPV vaccine doesn't really have a correlation with the whole answer of Mrs. Crumble having the whole brain injury thing, and that's why she's coherent. So the only reason it would make sense for me that the kids would survive and the adults got turned into ghoulies was maybe if the bioweapon was targeting something that only kids naturally make in their bodies, and then they just stop making it as adults. Because that way, that would be interesting, because then the kids would have to constantly worry, because at some point when either they're 18 or maybe when they're 25, when the brain is fully matured, maybe that's their time clock to say like, oh, if we don't figure this shit out, I'm going to become a ghoulie too once I hit 25. You know what I mean? It seems more of a time crunch as opposed to like them like, oh, we have the rest of forever to deal. All we have to do is just survive each other. But it just puts more of a deathly clock on their hands if they know that, oh crap, once we are actually adults, we're stuck being ghoulies now, so we got to really fix this shit up type of thing. So it's a lot of questions regarding the mythology around the apocalypse and what makes what tick, what happened to what happened where. I mean, Josh had a lot of valid questions when he met the gamers tribe for the first time. But since they revealed that everywhere, that not only was the internet still intact and the satellite were still working and they could still game with people around the world, and they know that the apocalypse happened around the world, they just don't know why. So it's just something like that for there. All right. So how long am I at right now? I'm at 40 minutes. That's a lot. I'm sorry. But let's talk about the supernatural connections, because that's all I want to talk about when it comes to this show. Also, bear in mind, I'm talking about 10 episodes worth of a show right now, as opposed to just one. So please bear in mind how long the video is. But supernatural connections, as you know, or if you haven't known already, huge fan of the show. It's currently in its 15th and final season of the show. And a lot of people right off the bat, before the pilot episode of Daybreak finished, already see two connections to the show Supernatural. So that piqued my interest initially. That's why it was put on my list the moment that my coworker told me the other connection to it. Because I already knew the first connection, and that is the fact that Colin Ford, aka Josh Wheeler, is the main character in the show. Why is that a supernatural connection? Is because because Colin Ford played young Sam Winchester on Supernatural between 2007 and 2016. So he only appeared for 6 episodes, but it was over the course of 9 years. So I really saw I really saw Colin grow on Supernatural. And I will have also a fun fact, which I didn't realize until I was looking up like the actors' names and stuff. I know who Colin Ford is, okay, because of Supernatural, but I did not know his age, like his actual age. So here's the thing. During the filming of Daybreak, Colin is 23. And what's really weird is the fact that Jared Padalecki, who plays the original Sam Winchester, he was 23 when Supernatural started. So the fact that at 23, Sam Winchester started at 23, and then you have the younger version of Sam Winchester now being 23 when the show is ending. It's just like, that's mind-boggling to me. It's like, it's one of those weird number coincidences. Like, also like with the Hillywood show when they did the Supernatural parody too. The fact when they did that birthday roll call, the fact that you have Jensen and Hilly having their birthdays a day apart and they're both playing Dean in the parody. And then you have the same with Osric and Jared, who both played Sam in the parody. Well, both in the parody and in the real show. And they have their own birthdays just a day apart. And their pairings themselves, Jensen and Jared, and then Hilly and Osric, they're both 4 years apart in themselves, which is just like a huge number thing. It's just like, I don't know. I get like really like hyped up for number coincidences because like sometimes you just cannot plan a coincidence like that, especially with like ages and birthdays and stuff. You can't plan that. That's like the huge coincidence ever. So I just wanted to put that fun fact out there. Okay, so the second obvious supernatural connection is the character Sam Dean, or full name Samara Dean, which is the love interest of Josh Wheeler, which is Colin's character. Sam Dean, obviously the fact that Sam and Dean Winchester. But it's only an obvious connection just because of the fact that Colin is part of the project, because like they had to name the character before they cast the actors themselves. So that was something there. Also, that's another thing I want to talk about afterwards, so we'll get into that. So that was an obvious one there, but I gotta say, it got really, like, it was great in the first episode to say, like, oh, there's a character named Sam Dean, but then throughout the whole thing is, like, I wanted to just call her Samara, because, like, every time it's, like, Sam Dean, I really just want to say, and Sam and Dean. It's not just Sam Dean, just, like, 2 names, so it's just, a lot of times I was just thinking it's Samara or it's Sam. It's just, like, it's that. Also, it's just pretty funny as well, because then you also have the fact that Colin was playing Sam over the course of 9 years, or a younger version of Sam, and yet now he's playing opposite of Sam, which is pretty much what Jared had to do when he was Dean on Gilmore Girls, and then he has to play opposite a character named Dean for Supernatural. So it's just one of those there. And then like it's kind of similar with Jensen, who both Days of Our Lives and in Supernatural played with his character having a sibling named Sam or Sammy. So it's just like one of those name things as well too. I mean, Sam is a common name, but it's just like, yeah, there's that. Okay, third supernatural connection that I pointed out, and I guess you can argue with me about this, but I guess more that I thought about it, the more it's like, oh yeah, they actually did this in Supernatural. But then it's a common thing that it's not just a Supernatural thing, like, you know what I mean? But I'll still mention it because, like, they brought it up. So in episode 102, we do get a moment of where we get 2 versions of Josh talking to each other. We get the past version of him, and then we get the present day version of him. So this reminded me, and they're talking to each other about, like, having, like, kind of giving advice to yourself type of thing. It is a hallucination going on because, like, it is a hallucination. Or was it? Yeah, 102 or 103. It's one of that. But why I bring it up as a supernatural connection is because it really reminded me of when Dean did the very same thing in episode 504 of Supernatural, where it was present day Dean talking to future Dean, and it literally was 2 versions of Dean talking to each other instead of like an imaginary type of thing. So it's just like the whole double appearance camera-wise. And then also on the course of Supernatural, they've done a lot of like, or technically no, I shouldn't say that, because a lot of the times when you see, for that one, that time in 622 was when Jared had to play opposite of himself, but those were hallucinations. So that's something there. And then every other time that Supernatural has done where the actors had to play two versions or two different characters on the same screen together, it was two different characters. It wasn't like the same character at two different points in time or something like that. It was literally either a shapeshifter, it's another character with their face, or it was like a vessel possession or a hallucination or something like that. So it was really 504 where you really literally had the same character at two different points in time talking to each other, which is similar to what Josh was dealing with in the episode, which is what I wanted to point out. Now, there's another one. There's a major one. Episode 108 had like a huge, literally, for the whole duration of the show to that point, I wasn't really looking for supernatural connections. If it happened, it happened. 108, once it started, it's like, no way. They did not just do that. It's like I immediately thought supernatural for it. So this is what I want to talk about. It is first off, it's the flashback episode. So we get a lot of backstory about Josh when he's sharing things with Samara. So first off, Josh explains his skateboard, and he explains why he has 3 crowns on his skateboard. And it wasn't until I didn't notice what was on his skateboard. I don't know why. Up to that point, I did not notice until he explained why he has specifically 3 crowns. The reason why I say it's a supernatural reference for me personally is because specifically the type of crown that is on the board, I believe it's the same type of crown that Jensen Ackles, Jared Padalecki, and Jeffrey D. Morgan all got tattooed on their wrists in October of 2019. They got the 3 matching tattoos. Not only, it's kind of like an homage to the fact that the crown kind of looks like a W for Winchester, the fact that it was the 3 kings for them, the fact that they started the show together, the fact that they've had this long friendship, and it's like I know about the tattoo story from the Toronto convention that I saw, because also the fact that I noticed that they had a tattoo. It's when did this happen? Is it a character thing? Is it a personal thing? So the moment that he said 3 crowns specifically on the board, and it looks exactly like the tattoo that they have, I immediately thought of J3 right there. Another one is because we get the backstory with Josh in this episode. And it's specifically that he states that Josh's dad used to take him hunting as a kid, and Josh hated it, but he liked pretending he was a knight from the Arthurian legends. First off, Sam Winchester never liked hunting. As a kid, hated it. Yet his father did it. And also the fact that Josh's dad said that hunting has been in the family for the last 44 years. His father took him, his grandfather took him, or his father took him, his grandfather took, or his great-grandfather took his grandfather. So it's a whole thing. It's 4 generations. Yeah, 4 generations with Josh. As you know, with Supernatural, Sam and Dean are legacies of hunters. It's from their mother's side, but they're still hunter legacies. So that's something there. The fact that he hated it as a kid is another Sam thing as well. The fact that he brought up the King Arthur legends. Specifically, in episode 821 of Supernatural, Sam brings up those same legends. And I even put the quote, and I had to look it up, and it says it right here. But Knights of the Round Table had all of King Arthur's knights, and they were all on this quest for the Holy Grail. And I remember looking at this picture of Sir Galahad, and he was kneeling, and light streaming over his face. And I remember thinking, I could never go on a quest like that because I'm not clean. So the fact that Sam specifically connected with the King Arthur tale as a kid, and thought very deeply about the fact that he could never be a knight because of not feeling clean. As you know, we found out that he has demon blood later on. But then to have that connected to Josh talking about the Arthurian legends and all the different interpretations of King Arthur, literally when he's explaining that to Samara, they don't exchange names through that whole exchange. So you can literally take that scene and think of it as a Sam Winchester flashback. Because it would make sense that he would tell a girl that and treat it like hunting was as the actual like animal hunting and not supernatural hunting, which he's done before in the past when he brings it up to anyone that wants to be his friend or wants to date him. So literally in that scene, I could have easily forgotten that this was Josh Wheeler I'm learning about, and it could have been a young Sam Winchester all over again, just because of how it lined up. The fact that Dad was hunting, he did not like hunting, the fact that he had a huge connection with the King Arthur tale. So that was also something there, which also brought on a fan fiction idea. And I actually looked, and there's only a few Daybreak fan fiction stories. I'm surprised there isn't a crossover yet with Supernatural. So here's my idea. Probably won't write it, just because I'm swamped with schoolwork and my own lack of paying attention. But the idea would have been the fact that somehow Sam Winchester got de-aged and was able to have a second chance of life once again. So you get teenager Sam. But then unfortunately he got stuck in an apocalypse, and yeah, you get Daybreak. So it's like more of the idea of like Sam Winchester with his adult memories. He somehow got de-aged to be a kid, maybe possibly loses memories, but he still keeps his instincts, or he knows bits and pieces, but he doesn't know like the true facts behind it. So, but like all these things are still ingrained into him. So then he becomes Josh Wheeler. So it's just like one of those ideas, and then also explaining like how he's able to survive a zombie apocalypse to begin with. So that would have been something there. Another thing, a huge thing that was Supernatural connected was 109 in a Josh flashback was the carving of the initials into the cabin. We see little Josh being helped by his father to carve in JW into the wall alongside his father's initials, his grandfather's initials, and his great-grandfather's initials. It was CW, MW, LW, and then Josh's JW. And as you know, in Supernatural, we have Sam and Dean not only having their carved names in the Impala door, but they also carved their initials into a table at the Menelaner's bunker. We also have Mary doing that later on. Did John ever do that when he appeared in the 300th episode? I'm not sure, but those three Winchesters did do it. So it's just like that right there was just like, come on. You can easily, if anything, you could kind of just take that snapshot of the three. I kind of wish that instead of LW, it was HW, because if it was HW, that would have been so perfect, lining up with Henry Winchester, John Winchester, Sam and Dean Winchester, Mary Winchester. It's just like, so much. So there's that. Also in 109, we do get Josh having his own little monologue to his figment of his father in the memory. He knows that his father won't talk in this because this was the hunting trip that Josh never went on, so he can't really know what his father would have said or done. But this moment reminded me of episode 1222 of Supernatural, where Dean pretty much did the exact same thing to Mary. Dean ventured into Mary's mind to try to pull her out of this hold that the British Middle letters had on her, and with it he gave this huge monologue speech about what her decision and her demon deal ultimately did to their family, and what it did to him and what it did to Sam, and how it truly like tore him apart, and it pretty much ripped away his chance of having a normal life or being a kid for that chance. But like the emotion behind both those monologues had me thinking of each other. So that's something there. And the last not the last one, there's actually a second one. Second last Supernatural connection I have is in the episode 110, so in the finale, we get Josh dosing the katana sword with peanuts, and then he stabs Principal Bird, who later dies from the allergy because he can't die from the actual stab wound. Now, we do see this idea being planted in the pilot episode himself when he was dealing with Terrence Markasian. But the reason why I'm putting this as a Supernatural connection is because this kind of reminds me of what Dean did in episode 619 when he was dealing with Eve, the mother of all monsters. What Dean did was that he pretty much ingested Phoenix ash. He rinsed it down with whiskey, and then he goaded the mother of all monsters to take a bite out of him, knowing that the Phoenix ash would be infused in his body, infused in his blood, and when she drank from him, it would then go into her system and kill her, since the Phoenix ash is poisonous to the mother of all monsters. So it's kind of more of a goading situation in the sense that it was kind of like a Trojan action type thing. And that's kind of what Josh did with the katana story. Even though he stabbed him, even though it doesn't kill Principal Burr, the fact that the blade was laced with peanuts or peanut oil, whatever, which was what he was allergic to, is what allowed for it to, the stab allowed it to get into his system and kind of kill him from there. So that's something as well. Now the last supernatural connection, I didn't really pick up on it until I was watching one of the fan videos for Supernatural in regards to the type of Big Brother that Dean is. I'll put a name and username of the video up on screen right now. But pretty much essentially, and it actually makes sense, is the fact that in episode 522 of Supernatural, we get Lucifer Sam beating up on Dean, and Dean is not fighting it. He's constantly saying, I'm here, I'm not going to leave you. He actually says specifically, Sam, it's okay, I'm here, I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going to leave you. He repeats that over and over again. Now, the reason why I'm putting this as why it's a connection to Supernatural is because Josh, throughout the whole episode, or throughout the whole series, is spray painting everywhere, I am here, in response to Samara's post-it note of where are you? And he's constantly saying, I am here. In the end, when he reunites with her and he shows her that post-it note and his own saying, like, I am here, it kind of reminded me of the fact that Dean is telling Sam. So it kind of goes with my whole idea of maybe like Sam is like, Josh is maybe a DH version of Sam Winchester with no memory, and yet he's constantly remembering like the I am here that Dean was circulating in his head, and then he's constantly repeating it now. So that was a connection there. Again, a few of these could be far-fetched. It could just be me overreaching. But for me, these are the ones specifically that had me thinking Supernatural when it all happened. Some of them you can't. It's like, can you really argue with some of my interpretations for it? But then others is like, that's a little bit of a stretch. You're a little reaching there, which I can understand. But I'm very curious in the comments down below which connections you picked on that, or which ones reminded you of the show Supernatural in regards to Daybreak. Please let me know in the comments down below. Now, let's go on very quickly to the most disgusting parts of the episode. Pretty much I mentioned it in the video already. And that is pretty much any time we see a ghoulie really not being human. So that is when Miss Crumble did her whole retractable jaw thing, and Josh had to put his arm down her throat to retrieve the keys. That was so gross. I mean, like, it was well done, like, visually, in the point that, like, the graphics for it were, like, very convincing, and it made me want to, like, really, like, choke on that image. It's just, like, I don't want to look down a throat and see that. It's like, that's gross. Like, I don't even want to see normal scans that you get at the hospital when you know. It's like, ugh. So there's that. Also, the fact that when they showed Miss Crumble's back, and it was all holy and moving, and it's just like, it's that phobia thing that was tripping me out. I mean, like, I don't know, it's like that, it starts with a T, and it's like, I want to look it up, but then, like, I know it's going to show up photos, and I really don't want to. It's like, I don't have a problem with holes, like, with what the phobia really, like, goes against, or really what represents. But for some reason, it's, like, these type of holes. I don't mind, like, circular patterns where it's just, like a stenciled hole over and over and over again. I don't mind those. I don't like the symmetrical ones. But these ones, like, occurring in, like, what if it's, like, an imprint of, like, in a flesh of something, it's just, like, no, these are just, like, it grossed me out so much. It's just, like, no, I gotta... Ugh, yuck. And then also, Principal Burr's third arm coming out of his stomach, not only was the fact that, like, it was, like, trying to, like, claw its way out of his stomach, that was just gross, because I don't like that type of generated shit from zombie stuff. Like, that's one of the things I don't like. But then at the same time, it's like, why the hell was there an arm growing out of his stomach? Like, what kind of mutation is that? That's what I don't understand. Like, that was another question in itself. It's just, like, that wasn't what I was expecting when he started having, like, his stomach thing. And then, like, maybe I thought, okay, was there one of the kids' arms that are just reacting to it now? But then it seemed like more like it was a sentient part of Burr. And it's just, like, why? And it was gross. And it's just, like, ugh. Ugh. So, there's that. But moving on to season 2 predictions very quickly. December 17th, 19, Netflix revealed that they canceled the series. So I'm a little disappointed, depressed by that, because it was a different show and I did enjoy myself watching it. It was definitely a different take on the apocalypse. It was very insightful to see what aspects kids focused on when they really had no rules to anything. So I'm a little disappointed that season 2 is not possible. The last scene of the whole series was pretty much after Samara refused Josh's idea to live happily ever after together in Montrose. She decides to declare herself as the new leader, with all the former Jock tribe bowing down to her. She has Mona Lisa as her second in command, and yet we see Turbo, Josh, and all the other Daybreakers just left standing among the bowed down Jocks, and kind of having this stare off between Samara and Josh. That's pretty much how the season ended, which is pretty much how the series ends. If now I'm finding out we don't get a season 2. So, what would I have liked for season 2 if we ever got the possibility? I was looking forward to the conflict going on between Josh and Samara for leadership, because it seems like you're going to definitely have two tribes opposing against each other. And not only is that going to be an issue on a political alliance standpoint, but also for their relationship, because Sam seemed to refuse the idea of being with Josh, which makes sense because they're 108, 9, and 10 definitely showed them being hypocrites towards what the other one had done, and then later doing the same action and just having a different response for that. So I get that. A lot of it was just like not mixing on the same wavelength as well. But then Josh still seems to have feelings for Samara, yet Samara doesn't seem to have those feelings anymore. And granted, it's been 6 months since they've seen each other, but it's like that's going to be a conflict issue there. Also, the fact that I would have loved to see Josh actually being the leader for the Daybreakers. We do see it in the finale that he takes a step towards being that, especially when he was able to unite the Daybreakers with the Cheermazons to help them go against the Jocks and Principal Burr. So I would have liked to see Josh step up and take on that role, since at the very, very beginning of the series, he was more like, I'm a loner, I stayed to myself, it's safer that way type of thing. And now see him take on that position, that would have been really great. Another thing I would have wanted to see in season 2 would have been the more of an understanding as to the apocalypse itself. Why were ghoulies being turned into ghoulies? What made them different from the kids? Because I still don't believe it was the HPV vaccine that saved them. It had to be more of a biological, like something they made naturally in their bodies. I believe it had to be something like that. So I would have liked more answers towards that. I thought we would have get something, especially with Angelica growing closer to Miss Crumble. I would have hoped that we got something from it. We didn't really get that in season 1, but I would have hoped for that. So that is pretty much it. So overall, I would say give Daybreak a try, even if it's only for 10 episodes, now that it's just a short series. It's definitely an interesting take. It definitely takes a new spin on zombie apocalypse. If you want something that's comedic, go for it. Like if you're not looking for something that's like very dramatic or very like realistic in that sense, then give this a shot. It's definitely a new take on it. It's definitely a different style of filming, which is another thing too, because a lot, which I wanted to talk about, was like, usually when you're filming, you go script by script. It's only when you have a film, you're able to kind of do things out of order and film. Usually you'd film things by sets if you only have certain availabilities, which makes sense. And for a film, you have the whole entirety of the script, so you get to kind of pick and choose. For an episode, you kind of have the same thing though, but because of the way this show is shot, or the way it looked, because a lot of the times there's a lot of flashback stories that kind of overlap with each other. So you do see like one scene leading into another, but then later on you see the ending of that scene being the ending of a different scene, or like you see a bunch of flashback scenes and characters that are narrating running through the scenes as if like from a different angle. So I'm left wondering now like what was the ordering when it came to the shots? Did they do all their flashback shots of the whole series, and it's not just by like, because that's the main thing, because as a Netflix series, this wasn't like a week to week release of episodes. So I'm wondering if they were given all 10 scripts and then they shot them with like, okay, these are all like the flashback episodes or flashback scenes, and we'll all shoot those once, and then like, okay, now we're going to deal with all like the Turbo Jock stuff, or like the Turbo Jock Pro tribe stuff. We're going to deal with all the Cheermazon stuff, instead of like going like, and then just have them split in editing by the episodes. I'm wondering if that's what they did, because a lot of the times, because the 2 times that I've directed in school, it's a lot of work trying to match things up in regards to like different shot angles and matching it with continuity, which is just stressful to begin with. So the fact that a lot of their scenes matched up when they're not in the same episodes, repeatedly too, might I add, especially with the flashbacks, makes me wonder how exactly they actually filmed this series. If it was episode by episode, if it was literally by like the grouping of scenes of the whole series in general. So that's a question there I'd hope to find out a little bit something of. But yeah, that's all I got to say about Daybreak, guys. I definitely say check it out. Definitely different take on it. I also want to know, if you're a Supernatural fan and you watch Daybreak, what connections did you pick up on? If there's something I missed, or maybe do you agree with the ones that I found? Please let me know in the comments down below. And that is pretty much it. I did mention I was going to do New Year's resolutions. It is 2020 now. I'm just mostly going to talk about the fact that I'm surprised it's already 2020. I still remember like back in 2003, 2004, 2005, around that time, before Supernatural aired, believe it or not, when I was watching the show Dark Angel, and Dark Angel is set in 2019 and 2020, and I was watching the show thinking like, oh, that's a far long away before we get to that point, and now I'm currently in that point right now. So it's just like a weird, like, where has the time go time of thing. It's like, I feel like no time has passed, but then at the same time, it's like a lot of time has passed. A lot of things have changed since then. And so it's just like, it's weird too. And then like with like today's day and age, with like photos and social media, and people having the ability to go back to what it was like at the beginning of the 2000s, or 2010, 2000, or 2010, now 2020. It's weird for sure. So it's just like, yeah. So there's that. Pretty much my resolutions for 2020 are pretty much the same for 2019. I actually do keep the list on my phone, and I didn't really do much except for like the major different changes that I've done. So I'll try to check more things off the list. I am interested to hear what your top New Year's resolution is for 2020. Let me know in the comments down below as well. But otherwise, guys, that is pretty much it. This is definitely a lot longer than I thought it would be. Very sorry about that, but thank you so much if you stayed to the very end. I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much. My voice is very appreciative of this, because I probably won't have one tomorrow. So there's that. So don't forget to let me know, comments down below, what you thought about not only of the video, but if you're going to give Daybreak a chance. If you already given it a chance, what did you think about it? And if you are a Supernatural fan who gave Daybreak a chance, what connections did you think, or did you find, or what did you think of the ones that I found? Please let me know in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and check out my other videos if you haven't done so already. If you want, check out my Tumblr page. The link for that is down below. I reblog promos, web clips, quotes, GIFs, news, all that good stuff, all found in place. Go check that out. I may put a Daybreak tag on Tumblr. I really haven't had the chance to go on it. This holiday season has just been a crazy mess of things I had to do. But I'll look into it for sure. WordPress, link for that is down below. Anything I post online is connected to WordPress. A little more organized, a little more detailed, but still a work in progress once again. That's about it. For Supernatural, you can go to LiveJournal. The link for that is down below. Jot noted recaps of the episode from season 6 onward are in my LiveJournal. It's before the transcripts are posted, it helps me keep things organized. It helps me make notes of certain things. This is started it long before I started the YouTube channel. So that's something there. But otherwise, guys, that is pretty much it. So again, thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for for listening, for being supportive, for everything that you've done for my channel. Thank you so much. I will be back. Probably the next video I do will be for the Crisis. Either it would be for the part 4, part 5 of the Arrowverse Crisis, or it will be the return of Supernatural and Legacies. Depending timeline-wise, I know which ones I'm recording first, but it would depend which ones I'm editing first. So just be on the lookout for that. That is going to be in two weeks. Wow. Time's flying. Are you really finding that? Because I'm finding that it's going really fast now for some reason. But yeah, guys. Okay. I really need to go to bed. It's like 1:30 in the morning right now for me. Yay, 2020 already. Okay, guys. This is Mel. Wish you a great day, great week, wherever you are, and Happy New Year. Take care. Bye.